So glad that you're able to join in with us. Today we are going to be talking about emotional intelligence. And those of you who have worked with me have heard me say I think emotional intelligence and leadership, successful leadership, are pretty much inseparable. But I'm really excited today to have a special guest with me, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my experience with him, but I'd like to ask Jeff first to introduce himself to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Coppola, and first let me say how humbled and flattered I am to be your guest today on, I agree, a very important topic, leadership and emotional intelligence. I have the privilege of leading the customer support and fulfillment teams over at World Strides here in Charlottesville. And I also want to do a shameless plug for Penn State. I'm a very proud Penn State graduate, 2 times in their global supply chain program, and I am a student of leadership. And so I think when you get to a level where you have the privilege of leading people, you have to understand that that's a privilege.
Yeah.
And it's really important.
So Jeff, do you mind just sharing with everyone a little bit? I think a lot of people may know what World Strides is,
sure.
But do you mind just letting them know a little bit more about
Sure.
the organization you work with?
Yeah, so World Strides is the global leader in student educational travel, and it's funny when I was researching the company for my interviews, I had no idea. They take middle schoolers and high schoolers to DC, to London, to Madrid, to Rome. They take soccer teams over to the UK to play age groups with Manchester United. They take bands and orchestras and choirs to the Sydney Opera House and to Carnegie Hall and to all these festivals. It's really amazing. It's 400,000 kids a year travel with us domestically and around the world with the idea of igniting their experiences and growth through that travel. And so it's very mission driven. We are a for-profit company, but the mission is really incredible, and you can have a real passion around changing students' lives by introducing them to other parts of the world and cultures.
Yeah. Well, and I will just add on to that. You guys do amazing work, and you live internally the values of being committed to development. So we've worked with, MSBCoach has worked with World Strides for a little over 3 years, and initially developed out a whole management and leadership program that we work with them on. And then there was a next phase commitment to a high potential program where they're really investing in their high potential leaders. I mean, we're not talking little investment. We're talking a lot of investment of time, resources, mentoring, coaching, training. Same thing with the management program. Jeff and I connected in a class, and he had also was very familiar with other work that we do for Center for Creative Leadership, and had been through some of their programs, but then also demonstrated that passion with wanting to do a retreat for your team of leaders for customer service. And not just totally putting plugs in there, but boy, it is so refreshing to work with leaders and organizations that put their money where their mouth is. And it's not just a matter of, hey, let's do a once-a-year retreat to check the box and say, hey, we did this for them, you guys should be amazing now. So it's
I think that's a big mistake a lot of companies make. And Michelle she's right. I took this class and I said, oh my gosh, we're about ready to launch this new framework on our team where leadership is a key foundation to the framework that we were putting together. And we were going to take a bunch of folks that were very high performing, had a high skill set, had a lot of leadership traits, but making that transition from being a peer to leading your peers is probably one of the hardest things you'll do in getting to that leadership level. And I just felt that they needed some help with that. And so learning a little bit more about Michelle's process and MSB's process, the foundation in emergenetics and emotional intelligence was a big part of our curriculum, and teaching them the difference between leading, coaching, and training, and knowing the difference of when to use those skill sets and how to leverage your strengths to do that. I can't tell you the lift that our team got from them coming back from that, and the camaraderie that the class had, because we had folks from our Merida operation in Mexico, as well as here in Charlottesville, and Michelle just did a masterful job of managing the cultural, the language, and where each of them were on their leadership journey. And but I think that's the investment you have to make, because if they're all in, you need to be all in.
Yeah, and from a leadership standpoint, yes, we did a 3-day retreat, which was a huge investment. I mean, you're flying people in, you're putting them up in hotels, you're paying for food, you're doing all of this. But you guys have also just, okay, what are we going to do next? You're doing book clubs with them. You're leadership topics. You're staying connected, making sure they're using these things, which kind of using this transition our conversation to emotional intelligence, and thinking about from a leadership standpoint, being socially aware of where your people are,
right,
and then managing those relational aspects with them according to where each one of them are to help them grow and develop. So, I think the foundational elements of leadership is self-awareness and self-management. But when we start leading more and more people, especially leading leaders,
right,
we've got to go to those next levels.
That's a great segue, because the seminal book is obviously Dr. Bradbury's Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and he lays out the 4 quadrants, right? He talks about self-awareness and self-management. And I think those are 2 things you have to do really well to be considered for the next step, to be the leader, right? You demonstrate that really well. But then once you have the privilege of being a leader, it's that social awareness and that relationship management that is so critical. And so, Michelle and I've had this conversation before. I said, when you get to this level, it's part parent, part coach, part teacher, and you pray like you never have to manage. Because if you have to manage, you got a lot bigger problems. But it really is being able to have those skills, and because each of those people are individuals, but you're also trying to build a team, and so it's like I said, it's a lot like being a coach. You have position players. You want the best position players, but they have to be a team to succeed.
And I love your philosophy, and your people know it, and that is that one band, one sound.
Yeah, that's our motto.
And,
yes.
We all are working together. We're all individuals, indeed, and we are all working together with this as a team. So, Jeff, I would love to just hear your definition of how would you describe emotional intelligence if you were to define it?
Well, again, this is, these are the things that I've learned. And we'll talk about, all the learning and the reading and the influences I've had about emotional intelligence. But I think there's 4 kind of key traits around emotional intelligence. I think the first one is your character, and I think the components of character are, when I say civility, what I mean is, are you courteous? Are you kind? Do you leave every place and everything in a better place than when you found it? I think character is about, are you trustworthy? And I think people determine very quickly or not whether you're trustworthy or not. And then, are you genuine? Are you? And people will know right away whether you're faking it or not. I think the second trait is empathy, and that's a big one. And I think, do you care? Again, are you genuine? And I think, as Dr. Stephen Covey, said, and it really resonated with me, are you making more deposits than you are withdrawals? And understanding when to do that. I think the third trait for me is transparency. Are you approachable? Is every situation a win-win for you, not a win-lose? And I think, there's no real agendas. People understand where you're coming from, what you stand for, and that you're there to help them to get to the next place. And then the fourth one for me is engagement. And I think this is probably the most important one. And don't get me wrong, character is important and empathy is important, but, are you engaged? Do you listen? And when I say listen, I mean not necessarily about what's being said, but also what's not being said.
Yeah, that reading between the lines.
You're reading between the lines and understanding, trying to understand before you need to be understood, which again is another Stephen Covey principle. Yeah. I think when I talk about engagement, are you someone that is always open to learn? Learn in the situation, learn in the conversation, learn in the project you're in, learn in the situation you're in. And then the last one of our engagement is, are you inspired and are you inspiring?
Okay, can you pause right there and
Sure.
say that again? Because those are two very different things.
Yes.
And yet both equally important.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I talk about engagement, I mean, obviously you need to listen, you need to learn, but are you inspired to be engaged? And again, you have to be genuine about that. But are you inspiring? I mean, when you're a leader, you have to be inspiring. People have to get behind you. People have to believe in your other three traits. But are you inspiring? Do you listen? Do you learn? And do you have their best interest in mind? So be inspired, but also be inspiring.
Yeah, and I think those other things play to that as well. Because if people don't trust you,
correct,
it would be hard for them to be inspired by you.
Right. There's building blocks here.
Yeah.
These are all, these don't stand by themselves. They're all very interwoven. And most people, if not all, will know whether you're faking any one of these.
Oh my, yes. It doesn't take long.
No, it doesn't take long.
At all. And I don't want to belabor this point, but I really want to reemphasize that piece that you said about, are you inspired? Because I think sometimes leaders think they have the best answer in the room all the time, and that's why I'm the leader.
That's why I'm leader.
This title. That's, and so to be inspired also means that you are listening, and to how do you see that happening? That place of curiosity, so that you can be inspired by something different other than your own thoughts and ideas. That might be fabulous, but being even inspired by someone else.
And I know we're going to talk a little bit later on how other leaders have inspired me, but I think the thing that always resonated with me was, you're smart, but you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. Number one, and number two, there are a lot of different ways to do things, and all of them have equal merit, or at least should be listened to. But I also think as a leader, once the decision's made, then let's go get that done. But that's where the inspiring part comes in, right? So, these don't stand by themselves. They're all very intertwined with each other.
Yeah, so many aspects of leadership. Yeah,
and the last thing I'd say is, for these four things, you really need to leverage and balance the four of them to do one of two things. I think you want to leave people in a better place after they have that interaction with you, or you want to inspire people to reach and even succeed with their potential, what they thought their potential was. If you do these four things really well, those two things will happen for you.
Yeah, and that, thinking about that piece of social awareness of working close enough in relationship with people that you're stretching them, but not stretching them too far that they snap, or they feel like they're not able to accomplish, but then not under stretching them where they almost get bored and check out. So that's that social awareness, and we can't do it without relationship management, without being in relationship.
And I think a big component of relationship management, and I say this to our leadership team all the time. Hey, don't forget, we only get these folks for 7.5 hours a day. For the other 16 plus hours, there's something else going on. It's called their life.
That's right.
And it does impact what goes on inside of here. Likewise, what happens in here impacts what out there. So try to understand those influences and help people manage through those things.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so I'm curious, Jeff, when did you first, at what stage of your career did you first hear about emotional intelligence, and how did that impact you that it became something you began to embrace?
Well, I first want to give a tremendous amount of credit to my parents, who absolutely instilled in us a lot of these traits. My parents really talked about character, and said, at the end of the day, when they put you in the pine box, that's all you got. And that's all people remember. I think, and they were also very empathetic, and they taught us empathy, and they taught us, how to be courteous, and they taught us how to listen. And I think those are all, so I want to give a shout out to my parents, because that's where I learned a lot about this. You don't actually know it while they're teaching it to you, but then you get to a point as an adult, and you go, oh yeah, that's what they meant by that.
Can I just say something there to add on to that? Because it's funny, right before we started this Facebook Live, I was just wrapping up a coaching conversation. And one of the things we were talking about was how the leadership principles we were talking about were going to affect this leader's home life.
Right.
And so to all of you out there who are listening to this isn't a parenting conversation, but there's no way working on your emotional intelligence, when we work on it in one aspect.
Working everywhere.
the residual effect of how the benefits everywhere. Yeah.
Right. And then I think, it's interesting, until you read, Dr. Bradbury's book and he puts all those, 4 quadrants in perspective, you're able to go through your work and your leadership journey and go, oh, that's what Mr. Feeney meant when he said that. Oh, that's what Dick Rossi meant when he said that. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what Mike Piron meant when he said that. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of hard to pinpoint it. It's been a journey, actually. So I can't pinpoint one certain place. I think, you read Stephen Covey's book and you have the aha moment, and you read Dr. Bradbury's book and you have the aha moment. I have a list of books that I've read where each of them have kind of added to the aha moment. But I think, again, that my parents and my early career laid the foundation so that, but I think you have to be very accepting to get that feedback, to get that criticism. And if you, again, trust the individual, then, absolutely you'll take that feedback and hopefully do something constructive with it.
Yeah,
you have to be open to it.
Yeah.
You have to be open to it.
So, and it is a foundational element. And we know we can grow our emotional intelligence.
Oh, yes.
And so that's a good thing. I might not be able to grow my IQ too much.
Right. Yeah, your IQ is, despite all the cramming you might do, that your IQ is your IQ.
Yeah.
And I've had this conversation with my dad and my brothers. I do believe that some of this is innate, and I do believe in nature and nurture. By the way, so when I say innate, you're born with it. Now, whether it's nurtured or not, that's a different conversation. I do think some of these things you can learn, but you absolutely have to be open to it.
Yeah. Well, and our role as leaders to help people grow and develop in their emotional intelligence. So do you have any books? You've already mentioned a couple of books, articles that you would recommend out there that you say, hey, these are things that really impacted me that you would suggest other people read?
Absolutely, and I just want to say I'm not getting any money for these plugs, but these are all books, and then I want to share with you an article that I read recently about Coach Nick Saban that I think would really resonate. So, obviously Dr. Bradbury's book and Ms. Gleave's book around emotional intelligence, and the thing I like about that book is, it's pretty simple in terms of the concept, but you get to take the test at the end too, and then you get to take the test a second time to see where you can learn and improve on the 4 quadrants. I think Coach Wooden's book, The Pyramids of Success, is, and again, I'm a big sports nut, and I think there's a lot of parallel between being a leader in business and being a head coach of a sports team. But his foundation and his pyramid is I've read it twice. It's worth the read if you have a chance. David Kerpen's book, The Art of People, which just came out about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And, his premise is the 11 simple people skills that will get you everything. And he talks a lot about, the deposits and, listening and things like that. But it's just a different take on that. Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, which is an excellent book. And it talks about, why giving will lead to success. And it's a really good read. And again, I hope I don't offend anybody, but Dr. Bob Sutton's book, The No Asshole Rule, is actually the antithesis to emotional intelligence, and absolutely worth the read, because unfortunately, as you're trying to build your emotional intelligence, there will people be out there trying to sabotage that. And so it's a good read to kind of see those warning signs and how to manage and navigate that. And then Jeff Olson's book, The Slight Edge, I think is a read. And I think for anyone that's in school or just freshly out of school, read that book. It's just seven very simple principles that when you go, oh my gosh, that's not a whole lot, but it does give you the slight edge, on those things. And then Patrick Lencioni's book on the ideal team player, where his principles are about being humble, being hungry, and being smart, are all components of emotional intelligence. But I do want to share this article I read about Nick Saban. So, Nick Saban, he just won the national championship again, and they asked him, gee, coach, you've won 6 national championships, 3 teams, you're in the NFL. How is it that every year you get these kids to play at this level? And he said, I learned something when I was in my short time in the NFL. Right around draft day, we would get together and we would go through the list of all the great position players, and it was called and A&D versus but, B-U-T. So I'll give you an example. We got Coppola and Braden. They're both outstanding wide receivers. They're on the draft board. Coppola runs a 4.5. His yards after catch are 6 yards. He was all conference, great downfield blocker, but he didn't go to class a whole lot. But he really wasn't a teammate that everybody liked. But. Now let's talk about Brady. Yeah, she's a little slower. She's 4'6". Her yards after catch were 5. Pretty decent downfield blocker, but we need to kind of work on that. Pretty much of a situational receiver. And she stayed after practice an hour every day. And she didn't miss a tutoring section. And she was there for the Habitat for Humanity project. So the idea is you want to be an and, you don't want to be a but.
I love that. That's great.
And it's funny, I told that story to our team, and now they call each other out. Don't be a but, be an and. And so it's a very simple principle, but be aware and be the and.
Anthony, I think we need to put that on our whiteboard. That's one of our team members back here. So I love that.
All of those books build on all of those 4 traits and how to be better at them. And I do think if you hear some of the stories and listen to some of these journeys in all these books, you'll be able to improve your emotional intelligence.
It's wonderful. Thank you. One other question that I didn't prep you for, but are there any assessments that you think are helpful? I'm a big assessment geek, as you know. So anything that you would recommend that would help a person with any level, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management?
Well, I do think if you do get Dr. Bradbury's book, do take the test.
Definitely.
Do take that assessment, and be prepared, because as Michelle will tell you, those in the assessment world, you can't fool them, you can't fake it. They got you. So I'm a proud graduate of the Center for Creative Leadership's week-long high potential, high management program. And, you do the Myers-Briggs and the Super Myers-Briggs, but there was another analysis in there which talked about your propensity of being included or excluded. And
FIRO-B.
Yeah, FIRO-B.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I thought that assessment was, I got the most out of that assessment, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I got 360s and stuff, but I got the most out of that.
Yeah, and that's a situational assessment, meaning that it can change in different situations.
Correct, and that's what I learned the most, is that where if I'm in this situation, what's my go-to, and should that be my go-to?
Right.
Right. That's why I got the most out of that one.
Yeah, and I think all of the different human behavior assessments, and there's so many of them out there. Of course, our favorite is emergenetics. And I love FIRO-B as well. 2 different things, 2 different types of assessments. But when we marry these different assessments together, they tremendously raise our self-awareness of how can I manage myself differently now based on this knowledge that I have. It doesn't stop with just self-awareness. In fact, I jokingly a lot of times in EQ classes will tell the story. I worked with a leader several years ago, and he was an excellent leader when it came to making money for the organization and making tough decisions, not so good with relating to people.
Right.
And so after they'd gotten to a certain level, they didn't want to lose him, of course.
Right.
But they also realized he needed to get better working with people. So long story short is we did a 360. We were doing some work together, and we had built trust. So we talked about the foundation of trust. Yes. And then we were moving to emotional intelligence. And he was looking at his 360 again, and he goes, all right, I get it. I'm a jerk. Am I emotionally intelligent now? And I said, well,
you're halfway there.
I said, you're self-aware. Can we now move to self-management?
Right.
And that actually was the tipping point. And he laughed, and kind of an uncomfortable laugh, but it was like, all right, let's go to the next level of this. And so I think that assessments help us with that, but they also help us once we use them to understand ourselves. Now, how can I look at your different assessments and help me understand how to work more effectively with you and you with me? So as leaders, I think those are tools. For some people, it's more intuitive.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And for other people, that data is really helpful because it's not as intuitive how to work with others.
Right.
So,
I think that the hardest part is the self-awareness part, right? Because I think once you are trusting in that and you get enough of that, and again, depending on whether you're a visual learner, a data learner, or whatever the medium is, that's the tipping point's great. It's like, okay, all right, well, I need to fix that. And as soon as they say, I need to fix that, and so as to you telling me I need to fix it.
That's exactly right.
Then you go, okay, now we got a chance here.
Yes.
We have a chance here. So,
that own awareness of what you need. Well, so I'm curious, Jeff, could you tell us, maybe a couple of different stories? One of an emotionally intelligent leader, and I know that you serve in a high level of senior leadership, but along your journey, a leader that you have had the opportunity to work with who practiced and demonstrated high levels of emotional intelligence, how that impacted you in your journey, and then a leader that, we won't use any names.
No names.
That along your journey didn't practice emotional intelligence and how that impacted you.
Sure, and for the first part, I would like to use some names because they've been very, very influential in my success. So I've been very fortunate my entire life to have some incredibly influential coaches and mentors, from right out of Penn State, Tom Feeney hired me. I was the runner on the floor chasing parts for naval weapons systems, and he just taught me so much. But I think, he recognized I was someone that was going to work hard and wanted to do the right thing, and so he invested in me. Dick Rossi, who was the managing partner for the practice at Price Waterhouse, who literally came to my house and said, "Why won't you come work for me?" Has been an incredible mentor. He's still a mentor today. John Demon, who I met at Price Waterhouse, introduced me to my wife. Was a great mentor and took me under his wing, and we did some great things together at a company. And the reason I'm going through all these names is there's a very, very consistent theme here in what they did. Mike Piron, who is still a dear mentor to me, hired me at ASR. Allison Wagner, who hired me at Prometric and then hired me at National Geographic. These are all people that took an incredible, genuine interest in helping me exceed my potential. And
I can even hear the passion.
Oh no, they were.
In your
voice. I kind of believe in destiny a little bit. I was destined to cross paths with all these people, and then I think you're, in any type of destiny, you're given the opportunity. It's what you do with that opportunity that's so important. So you got to recognize it, then you got to do something with it. But all of them were just their leading style, their empathy, their character, and their engagement were all just things that I gravitated to and leveraged, and at very critical learning points, failures, things that weren't going well, things that went well, they had a way of saying things to me that A, resonated with me, B, I could see what they were saying, and then more important, I was inspired to make the change to do better. And I think that's the skill of an emotionally intelligent leader, is back to the inspired and be inspiring.
Yes, that's what I was thinking about.
So they were very inspiring to inspire me to make the change that I needed to make. And I'll give you two examples. God bless Mike Piron. He's retired now, lives in Florida. But I just gotten promoted into my first real live vice president's job. And it was going to be multiple locations, global supply chain. We were a $400 million consumer products company. And he pulled me in and he said, "Look, you deserve this promotion. You've worked very hard. You're really smart. You've driven a lot of change. The results speak for themselves. Let me just give you a little bit of advice." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Every now and then, why don't you just look over your shoulder and make sure your team's still with you?" And I kind of looked at him and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, Jeff, understand that you've gotten there long before they did, and people learn and adapt and do things at a much different speed. You've got to just, don't lose the energy, don't lose the passion, don't lose the smarts, but just be a little bit more patient with those that you're leading to make sure that they're still with you. You don't want to be halfway up the mountain and they're still at base camp, because then that's going to be a problem." And I tell you that because that's not, you can survive that as a manager and as a senior manager. You won't survive that as a vice president.
That's right.
And then another great story. So Allison, she hired me into National Geographic, had a lot of issues on the operations side. She knew I could fix them. And our CFO, Evelyn, who I adored, but Evelyn and I got to a point where we were agreeing to disagree. And it got to the point where it was disrupting both the teams and disrupting the business. So what does Allison do? Allison calls us in a room. She closes the door. Allison was never a yeller or screamer anyway. And she looked at the both of us and said, "Okay, I am really disappointed. You are the two best people on my team, and we can't have this. So you two need to figure this out right now, because we can't have this dysfunction. I can deal with X, and I can deal with it with Y. I will not deal with it, you two, because you know better." It was sort of like the parent thing, like,
Yes,
you know better.
that's right.
And then she got up, she goes, don't come out of this room until you got it figured out. We're in her office now. She gets up, she walks out, she closes the door. About 10 minutes, Ellen and I had it figured out. So again, she knew us. She was very aware of what we were capable of. She knew about our relationship, and she said, I need you two to figure this out.
Yeah.
So again, it was just another lesson
And
where
I trust you too.
exactly. So again, it was just another lesson, and I could go on for hours on all the different lessons. But again, I think the big thing is you have to be open to those lessons. You have to be introspective and think of it, and then you gotta put it into action.
Yeah.
But all these people were just if I hadn't met them, I don't think I'd be where I am today.
And the leadership aspect of not fixing it for you,
Exactly.
but calling forth
Exactly.
you two to tap into your ability to fix it.
Yep.
And like you said, it's not like it took half a day.
No.
Part of it, in just a matter of moments, it was like, okay, we've been called to the carpet, let's do this. And that just reminds me of that correction without relationship brings rebellion.
Right.
Because there was relationship,
Correct.
there was that, she's right.
Yeah, she's right, Evelyn. We got to
Yeah,
figure this
let's
out.
have
Oops, I told you. Sorry, Evelyn. Yeah, you two
Yeah.
better figure this out. Exactly.
Yeah,
So-
so great. So can you tell us, was there ever
Oh, yes.
a
Yes.
leader who didn't have emotional intelligence, and how did that impact you?
I think anyone who's listening to this or will listen to this when it's recorded will absolutely, that question will resonate with them. I think we all have worked for that individual who didn't have that. And in two situations, it ended poorly for me. And it did because I was not willing to compromise on those four traits. And I'm not a big believer in benevolent dictatorship. I'm not a big believer in bullying. I'm not a big believer in because I said so. And I'm certainly not a big believer that I'm the smartest guy in the room. I'm going to continue to tell you I'm the smartest guy in the room. Just do what I tell you to do. Now, and the other thing is it gets exhausting energy-wise, right? So you've got this positive energy, and you're trying to lead a team. You're spending most of the time doing damage control, right? And then you get to a point where you're just there's no joy in what you do anymore. And if you don't have the passion, you don't have the inspiration, it's sort of like it starts crumbling, right? And then at the end of the day, you're not going to compromise your character. You're not going to compromise your empathy. You're not going to compromise your transparency. And so you have to part ways.
Yeah.
You have to part ways.
And that is not equate to failure.
No, it's a learning. It's
Yes,
an absolute
it's a
learning.
Yes.
But it's for me, there's no such thing as failure. It's just learning.
Yeah.
It's just learning.
And sometimes things don't align. And when we are not in alignment, because closely related with our self-awareness, our emotional intelligence, what are my values? And
Can't
if
compromise those.
Yeah, if an organization or a team, if it's your boss, if the values alignment is so disconnected.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean that they all have to be
Right.
exactly in alignment, but if it's so disconnected that we feel like we are compromising, then we aren't living into being authentic, being
Right.
ourselves, and we sure can't be living into emotional intelligence.
It's interesting because, like your example earlier, both of these individuals were smart, very accomplished, had a resume of results, both money-wise and performance-wise. But, you get to a point where, you know what, that doesn't really matter anymore.
Yeah.
I took each of those things, it's easy to say I failed, right? It's easy to blame it on yourself. I think you want to look at it as, here's what I've learned. And a lot of times in those situations, you learn what not to do.
Yes.
You learn the behavior that's not going to be acceptable. And that can be almost as important as learning all this other stuff we're talking about.
Who I don't want to be.
Who
as
I
a
don't
leader.
want to be.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. And then I think what it does, it also helps you kind of see the signs if you ever kind of drift towards that. You go, oh, remember when, I don't want to do that again. Or I don't want to have somebody deal with that.
Yeah. And it makes me, and by the way, you guys can tell we're live because you're hearing all this noise in the background. We're right by UVA Medical Center, and the helipad lands over here, and you're hearing the sirens. So there's a little shout out for UVA as well. Wonderful place to be. Not in the hospital, but,
but it's a wonderful town.
Yeah, but if you do have to be in the hospital, they will take great care of you there. But you talking just a little bit, about the intellectual intelligence and emotional intelligence, and we've got to have both. You got to be able to have the smarts. But like Dr. Goldman's original research, from 1995, that
Right.
80-20 principle,
Exactly.
that the higher we go up the ladder,
It's actually
it
flips.
begins to flip.
Yep.
Yeah, and the more of the emotional intelligence that we need in order to continue to be successful.
Well, it's also
as a
like
leader.
it's sort of like what Dr. Goldschmidt says. What got you here ain't going to get you there.
That's
right?
right.
So at a certain point in time, your smarts allowed you to get to this level,
Mm-hmm.
but in order to get to the next level, you can't keep playing the smarts card.
That's right. Yeah, and creating those new neurological pathways, because the old ones go, wait a second, but this
worked before.
This got you promoted.
That's right.
Hey, as you're doing your self-talk. Well, just as we begin to, because we are talking about teams and the
Mm-hmm.
impact that leaders positively or negatively have on teams. So thinking about an emotional intelligent team,
Mm-hmm.
how would you, so I'm just going to stack 3 questions here because I think they all intersect.
Sure.
And this is somewhat how we will wrap up our day. And by the way, who all is joining us, if you want to give a shout out or you want to ask any questions, anything that you want us to ask Jeff, if you'll just type it in and we'll be happy to ask
Sure.
him here at the end. But thinking about, so we've talked a lot about individuals
Mm-hmm.
being emotionally intelligent. What, in your opinion, does it take to have an emotionally intelligent team? And so I said I'm going to stack a few questions here. Can you have an emotionally intelligent team without an emotionally intelligent leader? Or just the opposite of that, can you have an emotionally intelligent leader and not have an emotionally intelligent team? What are the outcomes of all of those? So,
All right, so let's start with the first one. So what does the team look like, right? And I think I can share a story because, you've been working with me on this one band, one sound journey, right? And so for me, you come in and you have a set of, I'll call it position players. And you have this person does this work stream, this person does this work stream. You have a couple here, a couple there. But at the end of the day, you really need to be a team. And so you kind of start with the fundamentals. And what we did is, I call it the 3 Bs, which were just the fundamentals of being on time, being engaged, and being inspired to do your best. And then we built our 4 core values and 16 key skills. And then what you do is you basically, either they buy in or they don't buy in. But what it allows you is now you have a foundation so that as those, and again, back to the patient thing, I had to be very patient because again, the way people adapt and adopt are very different, and so, but you do get
tell
to
us a little more about that.
So
The difference between adapting and adopting.
So adapting is more like I have to do this to survive. I don't necessarily want to do it. I don't necessarily am inspired to do it, but if I'm going to survive, I need to adapt. Adoption is I'm all in. I'm behind the principles. I'm behind the direction. I'm behind the vision. I'm behind the scorecard. I've adopted this now. And I think those are 2 steps. So you have to adapt. People are still, who's this Coppola guy? Do I trust him? I'm not so sure the framework's the right thing and this and that. And what's this one band, one sound? Isn't that from Drumline? What the heck? And so you go through all of those, those stages. And so as an emotionally intelligent leader, you have to watch the adaptation and the adoption. And I call adoption the aha moment. It's the aha moment when they go, oh my goodness, I get it. Oh my goodness, I can do this. I'm all in.
I was going to say I'm in.
I'm all in.
Yeah.
And so what happens is it gets very infectious, right? Because everybody's talking about adapting. We've got to do this. Capole's going to fire us if we don't do it. We'll salute the flag. But then as certain groups started adopting, and what really was the lift, candidly, was when the new leaders came back from the leadership summit and they were in. You could not be in. I mean, because now, holy smokes, you were one of us and oh my goodness, okay? And then once everybody kind of understood, it's the tipping point, it's the aha moment. Everybody's in. And then the lift and the energy, like I said to Michelle once before, gosh, if I could just bottle and sell that, I'd be drinking umbrella drinks somewhere right now. But that's so, yes, I think that, so it's you as the leader. You have to set the standard on performance. You have to set the vision. You have to define success of that division, of that vision, and then you put together the steps. You make sure they have the tools. You make sure they know they're empowered, and then candidly you get out of their way because they'll forget more than you'll ever know. and then you manage the adaption and the adoption.
Yeah.
That's what you manage.
Could we use similar words of alignment? I love that, how you just described that. Would that be similar to transactional and transformational?
Yes, there's an absolute parallel between the two. You know, I'm transactionally going through this because I need to do this to finish this work stream, get my paycheck, you know, come here every day.
Yeah.
But transformational is I'm holistically into this thing. I get what we're doing. We're one band, one sound. We're delivering a low effort for our customers. This is how success is defined, and here's my part and my value in that.
And I feel so connected to
I'm
it.
connected to it now.
Yes.
You know, beyond the paycheck and the performance.
Of course,
instead
we want that.
Yeah, you
but
need
beyond
that, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm all in on this mission. I'm all in. I am making a difference.
Yeah.
And there's an opportunity that if I continue to do this really well, I may someday be a leader.
Yeah.
Which is really what my job is. My job is to develop the next leaders for World Strides. And whether that's leadership in customer support or fulfillment or account management or marketing or finance, it doesn't matter. I would love to have folks that came through our part of the organization to be leaders other places.
And you know, one of the things I will say, Jeff, I've worked with you enough and plenty of other leaders at World Strides, but referring to you, yes, it is about growing and developing the next leaders at World Strides, but the authenticity and the emotional intelligence around, it's about growing people.
Yes.
It is definitely first and foremost. And then, of course, that's going to benefit the organization
right.
when we're investing in and growing people. So thinking about how you just described that, you know, the team that works together and,
right.
and the difference between a group and a team.
Yes.
So a group is just, you know,
right.
you throw a bunch of intelligent people in a room together. That doesn't
right.
make them a team.
Right.
You know, you could put the best players in the world together to play a hockey game, but if they've never played together, it's going to take a little bit of time of gelling.
Right.
You know, it takes that time to make it a team that functions.
Right.
And so I think those are some separators. What else, you know, do you think, could you have an emotionally intelligent group of people without an emotionally intelligent coach, or just the opposite?
Well, you know,
or I should not say coach.
Yeah, when I first you know read that question, I go back to, you know, the two situations. Their names will remain, you know, anonymous, where, you know, I was in a leadership position under another leader who wasn't emotionally intelligent. So I think the answer is yes, you can. Unfortunately, here's what happens. All right, I kind of call it a little bit of you love the people you work with, you hate the people you work for. It's a little bit of the Stockholm syndrome, right? It's like you start falling in love with your captor because you have to. And then I think there's an absolute cap on growth and performance, because that gets kind of pushed and stilted. And so when you suddenly realize that the efforts you're making, it doesn't have a return on your investment beyond the paycheck, then performance, growth, status quo, all that that stops. And so and I think a lot of people, most people come to work, they want to be passionate about what they do, they want to have value in their part of the process, and they want to be recognized if they work, if they perform at a high level, that they have an opportunity to grow. And if that doesn't exist in an environment, sure, you can get a group of people who need a paycheck, but you'll have a group of people who need a paycheck, and that's about it.
And when, there's
that's
not
all
the
you'll have.
commitment, there's not the buy-in.
Yeah, that's all you have. And so the other half of your question was, can you be an emotionally intelligent leader and not have it? No, the answer is not for long. Okay. So and here's why. And I'm going to use for those of us here in Charlottesville, we're incredibly excited about our #1 ranking this week of our Cavalier basketball team. But Coach Bennett, you know, he has his 5 pillars, and it's amazing because, you know, when you're playing at Division I, there's a lot of talent out there. You know, you can get basketball players, right? But you can't get his team around his 5 pillars. So he really recruits not to the talent, because that's given. He recruits to the 5 pillars, you know, which are humility, passion, unity, servitude, and thankfulness. If you're not genuine about all those, you're not in. And if somehow you faked it and you got through my radar, which doesn't really happen anymore for Coach Bennett because he's so good at this, I'll teach you the crossover dribble. I'll teach you how to post up, but this is the only team I want. So likewise, as an emotional, intelligent leader, you need to make the changes, but you have to be very fair. You have to be very transparent. You have to be very clear about the mission, very clear about the values, very clear about what's acceptable, how success will be measured, and then give them the opportunity. And then, as I always say, you make the choice. Don't let me make it for you. And so I think you have to create an environment like that. So no, I don't think you can have an emotionally intelligent leader and a not an emotionally intelligent team. You won't have that for long. Because as a leader, you these things are so important to you. You'll either get the adoption, or you'll start recruiting like Coach Bennett does against your virtues and pillars, and then you can build on that.
Which takes us all the way back to the beginning of emotional intelligence, that as a leader, you need to be self-aware.
Absolutely.
To know what those are. So it brings us back full circle. We're pretty much over time. Not that we have an exact time, but we try to run this about 30 minutes. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question,
Sure.
Jeff. So thinking about the team aspect and having the right players on the team and in the right position. So if we're using the metaphor of sports,
right.
It's not going to do you any good to have your point guard running center.
Right.
You need the right players in the right positions. Even if they are the best players, if you got them in the wrong position, it's not going to work. But what about the leader who is emotionally intelligent, who inherits a team or comes into a team that does not have players, using the metaphor, team members who are living into or even have, these, desires to live into these characteristics, or they just none of those things have been developed? How would you recommend that they begin to develop an emotionally intelligent team?
That's and it's funny. I can give an exact example of I got hired into a new role. I was over at American Safety Razor, and my first day of work, the CEO took me out to lunch, and he was from Dothan, Alabama. He said, "Capola, I'm going to just tell you, you should fire the whole bunch of them and build your own team." I said, "Well, Bill, I'll take that under advisement." And do you know, a year later, with the exception of one person who left on their own, it was the same team, and we won Walmart Supplier of the Year. So I think as a emotionally intelligent leader, you go in, and I guarantee you 99.5% of the world comes to work every day wanting to be valued and wanting to add value.
Hold that space right there, because that is so true.
So you got to find that, all right? So then, to your point, is the other situation was I had position players in the wrong positions, okay? And how they matriculated there, or how they got there, you know what? That's history, but I moved people around into the spots where I thought their strengths were best and they could develop on those strengths. And then I started working on, the other things that were important. The vision for the team, how success was going to be measured, what the expectation was around performance and skills, and that we are a team. That means when we win, you all get the credit. When we fail, I'll take responsibility. But we got to have each other's back. We have to be united here. And so basically what I did, I was commuting from Philadelphia down to Verona because we hadn't sold our house yet. And I called my wife. We didn't have children at the time. And I just said, "I'm staying down here this week." And she said, "Okay." And I called everybody in Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. And I said, "We're not leaving this room until we figure this out." And, the first half an hour, everybody just stared at me. And I was like, "I'm not starting this session, guys. You've been here longer than I have. I hear you at the coffee pot. I hear you walking out to your cars at night. Let's get started here."
Yeah.
And once the floodgates opened, like I said, a year later, one person left voluntarily. I was able to expand the team. We opened a Tennessee operation, so I was able to hire in too. And as I moved people around into their spots and I needed different leadership, I was able to recruit, again, around my 4 pillars. And like I said, we won Walmart Supplier of the Year. We beat Gillette and Schick and Wilkinson.
Yes.
So it can be done.
Yeah.
But you have to be, you have to know the positions, right? And you and I have had this conversation before. A great offensive coordinator doesn't necessarily make a great head coach, right? Just like a great salesperson doesn't necessarily make a great sales manager, and a great sales manager doesn't necessarily make a great COO, and vice versa. So I think it's the ability to understand the disciplines and what's expected of those disciplines, how those disciplines work together, okay, and then getting the right skill sets in there.
Wow. Well, this has been inspiring.
Well, thank you.
To me, and I've enjoyed this time together. And of course, this is one of my favorite topics. Is
Mine
emotional
too.
intelligence. So, Jeff, thank you so much for being
You're very
here.
welcome.
For sharing.
Again, so humbled and honored that you would have me for this session.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
And you are a leader, and like many of our leaders that we work with, that we see living into emotional intelligence. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you not only for being here, but thank you for what you do to impact the world with something that's so important, because each and every one of us are what makes that difference in what we're living into.
Agreed.
So for all of you who joined us today, this was our second Facebook Live. Thank you. And so please write in, tell us what you thought, what we did well, what we can do better. We're newbies at this, and we want to get even better at it. So we want to hear from you, or if you have questions, something, that even pops up later, you can certainly shoot us an email, info@msbcoach.com, or look up our website and reach out to us there at msbcoach.com. Anthony, when is our next Facebook Live? March what? Do you have that? I put them on the spot. Sorry about that. What not to do. But it's typically, I believe, the second or third Thursdays.
Yeah, the 15th to the 22nd.
Okay. So we will be doing this again. Just watch your email. If you haven't signed up, go ahead and sign up. We'll do one or the 15th and the 22nd of March. And we actually are going to be talking about millennials in the workplace.
One of my favorite topics.
That's right. We might have to bring you back. And so we'll be talking about millennials in the workplace.
How about if I just fire some questions in?
How to engage them. I've got a couple of millennials here coaching me on how to even have this conversation. One's behind the camera right now. So anyway, it was great to have you guys. And again, Jeff, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, everybody.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye now.